I like my job because when you go home, you know you made a difference.
Because it's just happy. It's nice knowing it's a very rewarding job. Very rewarding when you've helped. It could be like the tiniest thing that you've helped someone with, but it's like massive to them.
Just generally making that difference, because like I say, some people don't see anybody, or they've got a son that lives 40 miles away that comes on a Wednesday, you know, and that's all they see in general. And it's just nice that you made a bit of a difference to them, you know, conversation, chat.
They are brilliant. Richard, the carer there, and Leah, the carer there, they are absolutely brilliant. I can't fault them.
It can be a very stressful job, but on the other hand, you get more rewards out of it than you do stressfulness. And it's nice going to service users and they smile at you. You made the day. If they walk in and they smile at you, you know you've done something right.
I actually did something completely different before, but because I looked after my grandma a lot, so it forced me to go in and help other people. So if I could do it for my grandma, I'd do it for everyone else. And best job I've had so far, to be honest.
Come in and I might be feeling a bit low, and Richard will say, "Good morning, Doris," and I'd say, "Good morning, Richard, good morning, Leah," and I might be feeling a bit low, and then all of a sudden, them just saying them words, "Good morning," and "How are you today?" and they cheer me up. Really, really lovely.
It's like a lot of people, I think, "Oh God, Karen, I couldn't do that." But community is so much different. Like some people will just go and see you to have a chat with them because they're lonely and they just want to see someone through the day. It's not all like just all physical work. Sometimes it's social and interacting with them. It is quite flexible. I mean, I don't have to dedicate. If I wanted to dedicate my life to it, you can, but you don't always have to as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the chairman.
Item 9B, which is questions to committee chairman. As set out in the Constitution, a maximum of 60 minutes is allowed, after which any remaining questions will receive a written response. I would like to remind members that following a change in the Constitution, there will only be one supplementary question, which must be from the member who asked the original question, and the supplementary question should be on the same matter and should be in the form of a question, not a statement. There will be no adjournment debates, and there are 17 questions. So if I could start by asking Councillor Kate Fole about living with COVID.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I ask my question, could I just ask if the very reasonable request that Councillor Fielding made earlier today, having represented her residents over an issue of concern, that question 2 is actually withdrawn, please? I don't think it's an unreasonable request.
Councillor Gurley.
Oh, it's this one. Which one is it? There you go. Respectfully, Chairman, I'd want to have the question asked. There's been some other evidence come to light, which I'd like to be able to include within my answer about the future of Gateford School. And I think it's really important that members of the public are made aware of those issues.
Councillor Turner, it is your question. If you're prepared to remove it, then that is your decision. If you're not, then I will allow it.
No, I would like the question to stand, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All I can say is it's a shame that information wasn't shared with Councillor Fielding, but okay. Thank you. Thank you for considering it anyway. Okay, so my question. Does the leader agree with me that in order to be able to live with COVID, as the government intends we do, it will be imperative for us to continue to develop an understanding of COVID, including through continuing to monitor transition and mutations effectively?
Thank you, Chairman. Just in response to that previous point, I think important that backbench members are allowed to raise the questions in the questions section, which is what it's there for. So I recognise the challenge, but obviously not for us as an administration to decide what people can and can't ask. In response to your question, Councillor Fole, I do agree. Though we're lifting restrictions and seeking to move forward, clearly it's important that we continue to monitor the impact and the development of the disease. I believe that's exactly what is happening. And as far as the County Council is concerned, I believe there's a paper coming to the Adult Social Care and Public Health Committee in April, where those proposals will be discussed in more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Fole?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Just briefly, I think you probably all know that from January the 1st, COVID cases in the UK have increased from 13.1 million to over 20 million as of the 25th of March. And this week alone, there was a rise of cases in a week of 1 million. But on the 12th of March, it was reported that vital globally acclaimed COVID monitoring projects, including the Imperial College's REACT 1 and King's College London's ZOE projects, are to have their funding cut. A decision met with criticism and from domestic and international scientists alike. This is why I'm raising the question. We're really concerned. So, would the leader therefore agree with me that the government's decision to prioritise what seems to be a Treasury influenced decision to cut funding for public health service like COVID monitoring projects is short-sighted and concerning? And if he does agree, please could he tell them? Thank you.
Councillor Bradley.
Thank Councillor Fole for that. It's a national issue, not anything to do with the council, of course, but clearly everything is a Treasury issue. Absolutely everything that the government does is related to and reliant on taxpayer funding, so it's right that financial implications are assessed as part of the whole conversation. As we seek to move on, we have to maintain a level, but the right level that is financially sustainable. And if you followed the debate this week about levels of tax in the UK, which has been predominant down in Parliament, you recognise that we can't fund everything forever. However, there is a very clear commitment to continuing to monitor. So I'll read from the Health Security Agency and their guidance, which was announced in terms of living with COVID plan by the Health Secretary. The UK HSA will maintain critical surveillance capabilities to provide insight into emerging threats and retain contingency capabilities to enable rapid response, including genomic sequencing to identify variants of concern, the ability to scale up a national response, should that be warranted. It will retain the ability to enable a rapid testing response if needed, such as because of a new variant of concern. UK HSA will retain critical lab and contingency infrastructure, delivery channels, mobile testing, accompanying digital infrastructure, which will ensure that we retain critical resilience for rapid reactive capability to respond to any future health threats. There very much is still that active monitoring, scientific basis and evidence going on in the background, and I'm sure that will continue for as long as it's needed.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Nigel Turner, your question, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In light of the misleading comments made by certain Labour councillors in the Worksop area, would the Chairman of the Economic Development and Asset Management Committee confirm that Notts County Council will be delivering a new primary school in Gateford area of Worksop, and will he explain why the developer contributions to this project are not at risk? Thank you.
Councillor Gurley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Turner for your question. The provision of sufficient school places for our young people is very important to this administration, and we are determined to ensure that we receive land and monies from developers towards new schools provision. The Council will be delivering a new school at Gatesford in Worksop. I'll repeat that, Chairman. The Council will be delivering a new school at Gateford in Worksop. We are taking appropriate steps to ensure that the developer meets their obligation to provide land and funding contribution for a new primary school, so that the land and the monies for the new school are retained. We do not intend handing them back. Negotiations are currently taking place with the developer over the transfer of the land for the new school. The housing developer contributions available from the new build at Gatesford are as follows. A new 210 place school backed by £2.567 million from the Gateford Park developers, supplemented by £433,000 from Bassetlaw Community Infrastructure 11 monies, plus, if required, expansion from 210 to 315 spaces, which would be backed by £1.64 million from the Gateford Common Development, plus a contribution of £40,000 for extra land. Once the land has been transferred, the Council is expected to have up to 5 years to start the building of the new school. The Council has yet to decide exactly when the school will be constructed, and it is in discussion to vary the legal agreement to ensure that there is sufficient time for the school development to be progressed, not to cancel the agreement with the developers. Chairman, the only potential risk to this project is if certain councillors misunderstand the process or stir up unnecessary public concern for cheap, short-term publicity. We have good officers working on this project who, given patience and support, will ensure that the new school is delivered as soon as the necessary procedures allow. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Girling. Councillor Turner, do you have a supplementary?
I have, yes. Councillor Girling, what can we do to reassure the residents of Gateford and Worksop that they will be getting their school?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I can see why I was asked to withdraw this question, because there's a leaflet's going out as we speak saying that the school's at threat and that we're not doing what we should be doing. So no wonder they don't want me to talk about this. It's appalling. The land, and I'm sure Councillor Sybil Fielding knows the area well, so she should have known, because she would have seen the plans, I assume, because it's your patch, that actually where the school's going to go is where the site office was and where all the construction materials were being kept whilst they're doing the construction phase. So we couldn't have started building the school beforehand anyway, because they was using the land so that they could build around it. I was accused of grandstanding, and playing politics. But my post was because of the post I saw you and your colleagues do about the threat of that school. You started that. I had to respond to that because I have a responsibility, along with our fellow councillors, to reassure people that actually we are building the school and we don't want to unnecessarily worry. And that's poor. So to create a situation that doesn't exist and worry people, which actually in turn could put the actual build of the school in jeopardy, it's not bright. I'm sorry, but it's not bright. Yeah, you've had every opportunity. I know you've spoken to the officers on many times where they've explained the process to you. They've explained the process to you. You could have come to me and I'd have explained the process to you. It's absolutely what we're following because we have to follow that. We can't just build a school. There has to be a reason, there has to be a process, and we've got to follow that process or we'll be up for challenge from the developers. And we just can't have that. So I hope you're now reassured. And actually, you need to be taking them back because they're not true. They're not true. And we are providing that school.
Mr. Chairman, the question was asked by Councillor Turner, not by Councillor Fielding. And I, for one, find the you and pointing at people quite rude and quite offensive. Address the chairman when you're speaking, Councillor, not the individual who didn't ask the question. Show a bit of courtesy.
Councillor Girling, do you want to continue? Or ask that you address the chair and not other members.
Sorry,
of the
Chairman,
chamber.
but I just get frustrated that somebody would put out that sort of propaganda and then ask me to withdraw ask the question to be withdrawn for their own benefit. So I do apologise. If you felt I was being aggressive to you, Sybil, I'm not. I'm just frustrated and passionate about the fact that this council, Chairman, this council does everything it can to make sure schools are built in the right place for the right amount of pupils, and we even build in the fact that actually those schools can be extended if needed. And I think it's really poor that that's actually challenged when there's no foundation to challenge it.
Thank you, Councillor Girling. Councillor Rosny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does the Chairman of the Transport and Environment Committee feel that the Provisional Highways Capital and Revenue Programmes 22 to 25 is the magic bullet needed to fix Nottinghamshire's broken roads and pavements?
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not so much a case of a magic bullet. This is more a case that we've actually fired the starting gun for the implementation of the recommendations of the cross-party highway review. And this does give me the opportunity to really thank the independents and all the opposition members for their unanimous support of these recommendations. The unanimous support of the recommendations. So I'm so glad that we're all in agreement. Recently published data from the Department of Transport actually reveals that Nottinghamshire is ranked joint second out of 24 county councils for having the best A roads in the country. And there's more, Mr. Chairman. Nottinghamshire is ranked joint first out of 24 county councils for having the best B and C roads in the country. So, Chairman, the truth is that the major roads for which we're responsible for are among the best in the country. These are the ones that are most critical to the economic prospects of this country and county, its 7 districts and all of the residents.
Could we please be quiet in the chamber while a member is on his feet speaking? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Therefore, the main thrust of our work now is to improve our unclassified roads. But even regarding these, we are by no means the worst, according to Department for Transport statistics. Therefore, the continuing mantra of claiming Nottinghamshire has the worst roads in the country is absolutely, simply misleading and not true, Mr. Chairman. In last month's budget meeting, this Conservative administration created a £15 million reserve for highways and environmental initiatives, from which an extra £12 million will be spent to implement the unanimous recommendations of the Highways Review. Have I mentioned it was unanimous, Mr. Chairman? And the resulting Highways Improvement Plan. Strangely,
the Independent Alliance voted against that £15 million extra investment. However, we will invest around £3 million per year to double the number of gangs from 4 to 8, working on permanent patching repairs on our highways, delivering road resurfacing and other improvements across Nottinghamshire. This is already underway. We have for the first time moved to a 3-year programme, allowing the public to be better informed of forthcoming works. This approach also gives us a better opportunity to plan ahead and seek efficiencies with our contractors. We are changing the emphasis from small pothole repairs to larger permanent patch repairs. And I'm sure that doesn't come as a surprise because we've mentioned it many times, Mr. Chairman. Although obviously we will still carry out some temporary pothole repairs where emergency and immediate safety concerns need to be addressed. There are 381 individual road, footway and drainage schemes planned across the county, full details of which can be found on our website. Residents can expect an increase in spend on footway improvements and drainage repairs, demonstrating that these are all part of the Highway 2. The 3-year programme, and the asset management work that it's based on provided us with an evidence base to make the case for future funding bids for government, including the opportunities that devolution may bring forward around longer-term funding. For the second Conservative administration running, we have boosted the basic highways budget with significant additional resources, showing our commitment to improving Nottinghamshire's roads. However, we all need to be realistic. As we stated very clearly last month, this should be seen as the latest stage in a long, ongoing process to improve our unclassified road network to the standard we would all wish to see. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Drosny, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I'd like to thank Councillor Clark for his answer. I think I'll respectfully disagree with his assertions about the state of the roads, and I'm sure many members of the public would too, because it's one of the rare times we've seen a case of Tinkerbell theory where people just wish it would be true and hope that that's not real policy. Mr. Chairman, the one big question I have from the answer that Councillor Clark gave me was about the move to 3 years, because the Provisional Highways Capital and Revenue Programme really represents a contrick, because the identifiable spending for highways work for Ashfield District is £1 million less this year than last year. It's 1.1 million less in Broxtowe. It's 985,000 less in Mansfield. And the reason I say that it's a contrick because of that 3 years. And I wonder if the chairman thought that members wouldn't do the maths. What I want to ask and seek from the chairman is an assurance that over that 3-year period, that the £1 million for each of those districts I've mentioned, which is less than last year, will be put back into those highway programmes so that the members of the public know, despite Conservative members voting against that additional £15 million, that the money that was in place, that they will be getting there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. The way the funding was allocated was using the same funding model that every other county in the country uses. So we were using the standard funding model, and that included very much the other 4 counties that we consulted during the Highways Review. They confirmed that they all used a similar funding model that we use. And I would just also say to Councillor Zadrozny that in years 2 and 3, there will be some space. We've left some funding available to allow for some, if emergency or unforeseen repairs come up, we will be able to react to those in years 2 and 3 because we've got some capacity that we will then fill. And obviously, if they're not emergency repairs, then we will add from the capital programme requests that have been put in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Tom Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In February, the government released their Levelling Up white paper. Within it, Nottinghamshire and Nottingham have been named as one of the first 9 areas in England invited to seek a devolution deal. Could the Leader of the Council please give an update on where we are currently with the discussion process and provide some more details on what this will actually mean for the county, along with any likely long-term economic benefits this will bring to Nottinghamshire?
Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for the question and another chance to update members on progress with our devolution talks, which I know are central to many people's thoughts in terms of the work of the council. Came up a lot in our discussion around governance earlier on. So grateful for the chance to raise this further. We're making progress. We're moving very much in the right direction in terms of ticking government's boxes. And on Friday of last week, we, together with partners in Nottingham, Derby and Derbyshire, submitted the more detailed pro forma, which explained precisely what kind of structures, what kind of powers and outcomes we are seeking from our negotiations. The next step is likely to be that we will hear back from the Minister and from the Department in the coming weeks to let us know that they're happy to go forward. I hope also to let us know that they're happy for us to go first, which I think is important. It's worth feeding back from our recent meetings with ministers that they were very clear that they want to take forward first the most ambitious proposals in terms of devolution, in terms of scale, in terms of the powers that we're seeking. They want to do something big and important, and our county is big and important. The deal that we are seeking is, we think, the most ambitious of all of those that are coming forward in terms of the scale, the population of the area that we're talking about, would make us the 3rd largest combined authority in the country. So huge potential, and I would hope that we will be one of the early adopters of the scheme. In terms of opportunities to improve things, where the pro forma asks us, would you like powers over X? We have answered yes, and we will take the opportunity to ask for absolutely everything and more. We've filled in a very lengthy and any other things you can think of section at the bottom of that pro forma, and we'll continue to push for all of those, but they include things like powers and funds to improve our local transport infrastructure, including buses, the ability to access things like bus innovation funding, to localise our adult skills and further education policies, both to build on some of the work that's already happening within the county, such as the NTU West Knox Partnership in my own constituency, and build career paths within those communities, to collaborate more closely with district and borough colleagues and others on delivering public services to the benefit of local residents. There are lots of opportunities for us to take forward, and having submitted that pro forma, which has been made available to stakeholders, including those district and borough colleagues, including people like universities, police and crime commissioners and others who have been involved in working up some of the programmes for these behind the scenes. It's been a very collaborative process. We will take all of those forward, and people should have the opportunity to see them. I think all group leaders in here have had them and seen them as well. So if you haven't, as backbench members, please do go and ask your group leaders to have a look. I'm pleased to say that these proposals were passed unanimously through Policy Committee on Thursday. Grateful for the unanimous support in that meeting, and grateful to Councillor Lawton for stepping in to chair. I had to be in Westminster to protect government business. I know that colleagues will recognise, given the motion that we have coming later on today, that I was in Westminster in order to protect business around increasing national insurance thresholds, which is a £330 tax saving to many Nottinghamshire residents. Why that was important for me to go and do that. And it's correct to say it's an important milestone to the council. We had, of course, already discussed it in great detail behind the scenes, including with leaders of other groups in the room. And Councillor Lawton was able to very effectively chair that meeting, ensure that we had the perfect outcome to that, although I understand there were some shenanigans from Councillor Girling behind the scenes in other areas. So it went well, and I'm grateful for that unanimous support. I'm grateful to colleagues across both city and district and borough councils for their support and collaborative efforts to get the bid over the line. Lots of work going on behind the scenes in great detail with officers and leaders. So we look forward to hearing from the Minister, hopefully, that we can go first and crack on and pass the deal this year.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Do we have a supplementary, Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I do. Many members in this chamber, myself included, are twin hatters. Could the leader please expand on what role our districts and boroughs will play in a devolution deal and confirm that they will continue to be part of the discussions and be engaged with throughout the process?
Councillor Bradley.
Thank you for that, and an opportunity to reiterate something I think is really important. And I know those members who are members or leaders, deputy leaders of districts and borough councils in the room will be pleased to know and to reaffirm what was passed in policy committee last week, which is that it's really important that districts and boroughs continue to have a role both in the delivery of those powers and funds when we get them, but also in the creation of those structures. If we are going to build something that we can work with together, it's important that we all work on it together and jointly create those governance structures. I know Councillor Waters feels that nobody cares about governance structures, and I'm sure that residents don't, but they do care that we are able to put things in place that are enable us to deliver the outcomes they would want to see. So us working together in those conversations is hugely important, not just with district and borough colleagues, but other stakeholders like police and crime commissioners, universities, fire authorities, and others. That was formally agreed and approved by the policy committee last week. And again, if we want to fully utilise those powers, districts and boroughs obviously hold planning and other powers that are relevant to those who would like to seek from government, and therefore will have an active role in utilising those powers and making those decisions as all of that comes forward. So I hope that that's reassuring to those district and borough members, both in the room and with whom we are meeting on a regular basis to discuss our plans.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Michael Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. I've been contacted by families in Gedling Borough regarding the Knott's Holiday Activity and Food Programme, which is set to replace the Household Support Fund vouchers from the 31st of March 2022. The County Council's website, as at when I submitted my question on Monday morning, currently provided limited information about the Knott's Holiday Activity and Food Programme in relation to the Easter holidays provision. The County Council's website, and I quote at the point I submitted my question on Monday, said an update regarding Easter 2022 provision is coming soon. But the Easter holidays at the time on Monday were 5 short days away and are now 1 short day away, and this update still had not been published. I should gratefully add that it is now good to see that the website following my question has been published, and the purpose of this question was just to make sure that information got out to parents who quite rightly are concerned about this issue. Therefore, would the Chairman of the Children and Young People Committee, I think Councillor Taylor, please provide a comprehensive update and briefing to all elected members on the Knott's Holiday Activity and Food Programme provision for 2022 Easter school holidays, and she may want to elucidate on future holidays as well, because I know this will be a concern for everybody across the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose to start, I will address through the chair. If I address you, Councillor Payne, I won't be shouting, so please don't think I'm being rude. And also, just before I start, to reassure you, it isn't shenanigans to cut across your question, and I'm hoping that will become clear in the answer. Thank you. So I thank you for your question. The Nottinghamshire County Council website does have an up-to-date holiday activities and food webpage for spring 22, complete with pretty pink lettering and an Easter chick and an Easter egg. The webpage contains links to other pages with information on activities and venues for HAF events in each of the Nottinghamshire districts and boroughs, information for parents and carers on eligibility and how to get involved, information tailored to schools and professionals, information about activity providers, and a facility for children and their families to feedback on their experiences. Councillor Payne is correct. However, there was erroneously a separate page on the council website that stated an update regarding Easter provision is coming soon. Clearly this page was outdated and did not need to be there, and I apologise for any confusion that has caused to families and children who perhaps used the Knott's Holiday Activity and Food Programme as their search term and actually found themselves looking at an old page rather than the current one. So I do thank Councillor Payne for bringing this to our attention. On Tuesday night, the outdated page was deleted and the address was relinked to the correct page. However, Chairman, There are also two very positive outcomes to come from this particular discovery. Firstly, we asked officers to conduct a search of the website to detect and clean up any other pages which may be out of date or duplicating similar pages. So that's something that needed to be done. And secondly, we'll be publishing on the correct web page and elsewhere some very good news that I can actually announce today. So that news is that Notts County Council will once again be providing the free school meal vouchers to thousands of Nottinghamshire children during the Easter holidays. The scheme will again be delivered using money from the government's Household Support Fund, following the Chancellor's announcement in the spring budget that he's doubling the HSF investment to £1 billion. So this is great news for the 25,000 eligible youngsters across the county who will receive 125,000 meal vouchers. It confirms our ongoing commitment to helping low-income households as we continue to recover from the effects of the COVID pandemic. Parents in Nottinghamshire can find out if their child is eligible for free school meals vouchers by visiting the website. I won't read out the link. But of course, we will also provide a link to this information from the Holiday Activity and Fund pages to make it as easy as possible for families to access this help. So I thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Payne, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your indulgence, can I just say thank you to Councillor Taylor for comprehensive response and for the way in which she dealt with the question. It was intended in good spirit, and thank you for your information. Let me just also say, before I ask my supplementary, Mr. Chairman, that I'm incredibly pleased to hear about the announcement about free school meal vouchers. I suppose two parts to my supplementary, Councillor Taylor. Would you, in very quick time, given that we're now a matter of days away from the school holidays, ensure that that information gets out to schools and to parents? I just share with you as an example that there is a school in my division that shared information that vouchers were not going to be available 4 days before the school holidays, which is what originally gave rise to correspondence around this issue. So I think in quick order, we need to use all of our officers around this chamber and our links with the schools. And if you could work with us on that to make sure that people are informed about it, I would be very grateful. And the second part of my supplementary, Councillor Taylor, in anticipation of the government's white paper that they've announced around this particular issue about child poverty is, will you work with us on this side of the chamber to support the LGA's cross-party calls for free school meals to be auto-enrolled in the future, so the obligation is not on the individual parent? The cross-party LGA research shows that that would bring 215,000 children into free school meals who are currently eligible, so without changing any of the eligibility criteria. And I would certainly welcome, even if you don't feel able to give a commitment now in the chamber about that, a further discussion with you in coming days, and hope that the administration will commit to working with us on this side to push the government in the white paper to make that commitment. There are something like 45,616 children in poverty across Nottinghamshire, including in all of our divisions. And we had a really passionate debate last time led by Councillor Doddy. So please work with us to do everything we can to try and push that number down and get as many children supported as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Payne, for the extra questions. Frustrating with the timing, I would say, because I can actually reassure you that the information about the free school meal vouchers was actually communicated directly to all schools through the usual cascade mechanism on Tuesday of this week. So it has actually gone out already. Obviously, this isn't the HAF programme as such. This has come from the other funding stream. And in that respect, the announcement was only made last Wednesday. We had to go through certain internal processes in terms of how we were potentially going to be releasing funds to do this. But we did do that. This is actually across my own area and Councillor Cotty's area, and with help from finance colleagues. So that message did go out comprehensively to schools, and my understanding is that now that we've spoken in the chamber today, the other mainstream comms will also be going out today to reinforce that message. And I will ask officers who can hear me in the chamber to just make sure that we are quite certain that our schools have had as many messages as they need to share that programme and deliver the free school meal vouchers. So that's the first part. I think the second part is probably even easier, because that's just in terms of an ethos and a commitment. And I can't see why, in any process for any facility, one would not seek to do some form of, again, cascading or auto connection that would actually make the lives of children and families easier in accessing the benefits and the extra support they need. So happy to speak to you outside the chamber also.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Girling.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Would the Chairman of the Communities Committee confirm that there are no plans, I repeat, no plans to relocate or close Hucknall Library?
Councillor Cotty.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Girling, for the question. I'm happy to confirm again that there are no plans to relocate or close Hucknall Library. That's contrary to suggestions made by Councillor John Wilmot recently in the local media. At the recent budget meeting...
Sorry, Chairman, point of order.
What is your point of order?
86, personal explanation. At no point has Councillor Wilmot or myself or any Independent Alliance member suggested that this council was closing libraries. We've sought assurances that they would be maintained in the current places, but I think it's a bit disingenuous to say we said they were going to be closed.
Thank you, Councillor. I assume, Councillor Cotty, that you have evidence of the statement that you're referring to?
Councillor Wilmot's article in the Hucknall Dispatch.
In which case, continue.
Thank you. So at the recent budget meeting, the last council on the 24th of February, I promised the Conservative administration would protect every one of the council's network of 60 libraries and their mobile provision. I stated that nobody who has access to a library within a reasonable distance of where they live now will cease to have that access while we were in office. I was therefore disappointed that Councillor Wilmot seemed to twist the word that I imply that Hucknall Library is under threat. And to be clear, I said we would protect Hucknall Library and our other 59 libraries. I did not suggest that there were any plans to move Hucknall Library from its current location. Last week, I took the opportunity to visit 3 libraries in Ashfield with Councillor Girling to make this position clear to the library staff and the users. Chairman, I've known Councillor Wilmot since the days he represented the Labour Party and Hucknall First Community Forum. I don't previously recall him using scaremonger tactics to seek some cheap political advantage. It certainly doesn't suit him, and I think Councillor Wilmot should stay true to the standards of decency which he is usually known for and that I expect from him. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Girling, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Cotty for his question and thank him for taking me round to the main libraries in the Ashfield area, actually, because it's a good job he went to reassure staff and members of the public, actually, because would he agree with me that it was very disturbing to hear that from one of the managers that they'd just taken on a cleaning lady who, within a week of being taken on, heard that we were closing the libraries and that she was fearful of her job and that we had to reassure the manager to reassure her that that wasn't going to be the case. But he also agreed with me that actually the member of the public there who runs his business from the library was very concerned, and he was reassured that we were not going to be doing what's been suggested. And just to confirm, Chairman, as well, and so this is a part of a clarification, at my last EDAM meeting, out of the blue, and it's a shame Councillor Shaw isn't here, actually, because I'd have preferred him to be here, stated that we was closing Hucknall Library, out of the blue. And I had to reassure him that we weren't. And that, as when I sort of went through the reasons why and how did he come up with this, his throwaway statement was that...
Councillor Girling, you need to ask a question.
As well. Well, okay, to agree with me that to say that moving the library to Topwigay would mean that the library wasn't in Hucknall. Well, of course it wouldn't be, and it's not something we'd even think about doing. Do you agree with me, John?
Councillor Cotty.
Yes. I think so, and I can't say I was surprised at some of the reactions that we did receive, but to have staff concerned about their jobs, and when I was outside the library with your good self and a former councillor from here, we're talking to residents about their library closing. That's what they were under the impression for. So I'm glad I went, and I'm glad we spent the morning talking to people. And from the press release, it said that the Hucknall Ashfield Independent colleagues, Councillor Shaw, Lee Waters, and my friend, he's written an urgent letter to library bosses telling them what to commit to keep Hucknall Library open. I didn't receive a letter, and I, as chairman of Inspire, I would have thought he could have picked a phone up, he could have emailed me, he could have asked me to go and see him, but that didn't happen. So I'm glad we've confirmed that Hucknall Library is staying open, and in fact, I think people know my passion, Chairman, about libraries, and I'll have to have an arm twisted up my back and probably further higher if they're going to start doing that. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Councillor Cutting.
Chairman.
Councillor Purdue-Horam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last Thursday, 24th of March, the Policy Committee held one of the most important meetings we've had for a generation at Nottinghamshire County Council. This meeting discussed the creation of a combined authority and the potential to unlock hundreds of millions of pounds along with extra powers for our region. The meeting was chaired by Councillor Bruce Lawton, who gave apologies for the leader, stating that the leader had been called down to Westminster on a 3-line whip. I don't know exactly why, close quotes. Could the leader inform the council of the details of this whip and what was voted on in Parliament on Thursday, the 24th of March last week?
Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure the Chamber will recall that I answered this question about 2 minutes ago in response to Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Purdue-Horam, do you have another supplementary?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank you for that very enlightening answer. Mr. Chairman, I do think it was a shame that the leader couldn't attend this important meeting when Councillor Lawton claimed that he had a 3-line whip. This is becoming typical of the exaggeration by members of this administration of the lack of influence with government. We've seen it with the decision, there's a question coming. We've seen it with the decision on HS2, where this council gambled 28 million of taxpayers' money buying land in around Towton based on a false promise by the Prime Minister. And we saw it when you failed to understand the integrated rail plan.
Councillor Horan, I've been fairly lenient with you. Could you get to your question, please?
Yeah, I'm just coming to it, Mr. Chairman. And thought it was a guaranteed extension of the Robin Hood line and a return to passengers of the Maid Marian line. Would the leader agree with me that this is actually a hazard in his role? It's easy to job share with people, but I think 10 months in, we are seeing it's not so easy to share one person between two important full-time roles, that being the Member of Parliament for Mansfield, an extremely important position, and also as leader of the County Council.
Councillor Bradley.
Forgive me, Chair, I'm still writing down all the things we've achieved as a result of my joint role, so you might have to bear with me while I just work through the list. In fact, the list is so heavy it's fallen off the table. I might have to go and think this through. I assume perhaps it's because Councillor Purdy-Horan has never had a position of any seniority or leadership, that he's unaware of how some of this works. Leadership to me, Mr. Chairman, is not about doing everything myself and hoarding the power in my office for me to control everything. Leadership to me is about getting the best out of the people around you, building a team of people who can deliver for our county. And part of the reason I felt able to go down to Westminster when required last week was because I trust in the people around me and that Councillor Lawton is perfectly capable of delivering the outcomes that we required from that meeting. And in that meeting, members will recall, the council unanimously supported the devolution proposals. So I'm not entirely clear what the problem was. As I said earlier on, I was in Westminster to ensure that government business to reduce taxes for residents in Nottinghamshire was passed. Quite important, I think, in the context of the many challenges that we face. And I was able to make that decision, as busy people often have to do, because you have to prioritise, you have to delegate, you cannot do everything yourself in life, as in this role, nor do I wish to do everything myself. It's important, particularly for those members on this side in the administration who, let's not forget, are all paid to do jobs and have chairmanship roles and leadership roles, that people are able to take responsibility for those jobs and to deliver within their portfolios, which is what we aim to achieve over here. I have no wish to personally sit in every meeting and do tick every box. I think it's worth also saying, in response to the second part of Councillor Purdy-Horan's question, which is quite laughable, really, having personally spent many, many hours in Number 10, sat negotiating directly the integrated rail plan with officials in Number 10, I can assure you that what we got in the end was a darn sight multi-hundreds of millions of pounds better than what we had at the beginning of that negotiation. The opportunity of Toton and Maid Marian Robin Hood line is huge. And frankly, you talk about a gamble of purchasing that land. Even if we flogged it all off for housing tomorrow, which we have no wish to do, we would make a fortune on that land. Yeah, repeat that. That'll go back. That'll be in the dispatch next week. The opportunities to develop that land, to invest in that site, the private sector interest in investing in that site is huge. And the opportunity for us as a county, as a region, under a combined authority, the Development Corporation, all the things we're trying to pull together, many of which are able to come forward and we are able to accelerate, to be pathfinders on, precisely because I can go to Westminster and talk to ministers about these things. The idea that that is some kind of curse rather than a blessing is frankly absolute nonsense. We're going to come to a motion later on where the Ashfield Independents are going to ask for the council to raise something with the Chancellor. Well, you know what? I spent 2 hours having dinner with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury last night. I've done it already. So the opportunity to do that and to have that engagement with government is really important. As a result of that engagement, we are a Pathfinder devolution deal. As a result of that engagement, we are talking about being able to pilot projects like the Multiply Numeracy project, like opportunities around the schools white paper, the opportunity for Nottinghamshire to go first and do more and get the investment that we haven't previously had, that members around the chamber have spent a long time saying that we never get. And here we are getting it. We have so many irons in the fire to the extent that we are struggling for capacity to actually do all these business plans at the same time, such is the positive opportunity that we have because of the hard work, not just of me, because leadership is not about me, it's about all the people over here who are working incredibly hard in their portfolios to deliver, whether that's school building or tackling social care challenges or selling land, keeping libraries open, delivering highways reviews and improving the standards of our roads, whatever it may be. As a group, as an administration, we are working very hard. So I actually kind of resent the suggestion that somehow I should have my fingers in every individual pie of everything that is going on within that council. That is something of an insult to other members who have very responsible roles and who are delivering an awful lot right now for the people of this county. We got the outcome that we needed from the policy committee meeting last week. I agree, it's a very important conversation. It's a conversation I have with district and borough leaders, with other upper tier leaders around the region, with other stakeholders on a daily basis. So whilst the meeting itself was important, whilst we got the outcomes, thank you very much, Councillor Lawson, for your excellent chairing of that meeting, that we needed. It wasn't exactly a new conversation, because most of those partners in the room have seen that information. Most of those partners in the room have been involved in directly discussing those issues with me and with others for many, many months. So, you know, we got there. I hope that is sufficient detail to answer your question, Councillor Purdue, and I just think you are way, way off the pace, quite frankly.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Henshaw.
Thank you, Councillor Quigley. My question to the Chair of Adult Social Care and Health. Does the Chair acknowledge the findings of the County Council's Network Report, Impact Assessment of the implementation of Section 18, Para 3 of the Care Act 2014 and the Fair Cost of Care, and the comments of the County Council Network's Adult Social Care spokesperson, Councillor Martin Tett, who, by the way, is a Conservative councillor, who said, "The government have seriously underestimated the costs of its proposals. Councils will be left between a rock and a hard place, either by raising council tax to excessive levels and cutting local services, or by seeing widespread care home closures in their areas. And will the Chair consider writing to government, echoing the analysis, the findings and recommendations contained within that report?" Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your question, Councillor Henshaw. Nottinghamshire County Council has a close, positive working relationship with the County Council's network, given the CCN's self-proclaimed role as the voice of England's counties. We are usually consulted directly by the CCN for our input, and it's fair to say that the views expressed in their statements and the conclusions drawn in their reports are often well aligned with our own thinking. The CCN's new independent report by healthcare market specialist Langbuisson analyses two key elements of the government's adult social care reforms. The first element is a proposal to bring into effect 18.3 of the 2014 Care Act from October 2023, which would enable more people who fund their own care in care homes to ask their local authority to change care on their behalf to secure better value. The second element is the government's intention to introduce a new fair cost of care, which aims to increase care fees paid by councils to make the care market sustainable. The government has presently allocated £378 million per year for councils to pay this new fair cost of care for care home placements, and to protect providers from revenue losses when private fee payers become able to ask their local authority to arrange their care and access lower council rates. However, the County Council's network report calculates that an extra £854 million a year is needed as a minimum to make the proposals workable and avoid large-scale care home closures. Such closures could leave councils struggling to find beds for those who require care and trigger a deterioration in the quality of care between local authority and private placements. CCN spokesman Councillor Martin Tett is therefore right to highlight the perceived shortfall of funding at this stage, thereby giving the government time to address this issue well before October 2023. So yes, members will be aware that the government's 1.25% health and social care levy through national insurance is designed to raise an extra £36 billion over the next 3 years. Currently, councils will have to wait until 2025 to access full funding from the levy, which would leave a significant funding gap between 2023 and 2025. The CCN is therefore calling on government to bring forward the planned funding uplift for local government in order to pay for the additional £854 million a year required, giving councils and local care providers confidence that their care markets will be sustainable. If this extra funding is not forthcoming, CCN argues that fair cost for care under the Section 18.3 policy should be delayed until at least 2025. To answer the final part of Councillor Henshaw's question, I will not write to government echoing the findings of the CCM report, but only because these points are already being made clearly and consistently in government circles by our council leader, who is better placed than anyone to make the case for Nottinghamshire and by extension other county councils too. In fact, late last month, Councillor Ben Bradley, in his capacity as MP for Mansfield, led a debate in Parliament. We talked about it in our committee, Councillor Henshaw, on social care in Nottinghamshire. Councillor Bradley told the Minister for Care and Health, Gillian Keegan, that funds described as being raised for social care through the national insurance increase must make their way to local authorities and care providers quickly to improve and support capacity. Councillor Bradley observed that governments often tend to focus on hospitals and the health side of funding, but ministers need to recognise that primary care, community-based services and social care are by far the best, most cost-effective ways to improve wider health service provision. As we heard from Councillor Richard Jackson in last month's budget, the government has already supported this council with a very positive 2022-23 funding settlement. This included a £33.5 million share of the national £636 million social care grant, which is an increase of £9.2 million on the current year, and £2.4 million from £162 million market sustainability and fair cost of care fund. The government has also responded to our calls for extra funding to respond to the COVID pandemic to the tune of £165 million in grants over the past 2 years. We should therefore be optimistic that the government will again listen and respond to the case being made by this and other county councils regarding fair cost of care and the Section 18. Thank you, Chairman. And once again, thank you, Councillor Henshaw.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Henshaw, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Elliott, for that in-depth financial answer. I mean, obviously, you mentioned the 36 billion that's going to be actually raised by the social care levy. The LGA estimate that only 5.4 billion of that is ring-fenced for social care in England. So we still have a big gap, and we still have a big problem. And in my division, I've got some excellent providers of care, but they're all struggling, and they're going to continue to struggle until people grasp the nettle and accept that there is a major problem. And I listened to Councillor Bradley's debate in the Commons. Perhaps a few more MPs ought to have been there to listen to what he'd got to say. Perhaps they're all doing the second jobs, I don't know. But there was still a definite problem, and I think everybody acknowledges it. And until we sort it out, we're going to have providers that are going to be struggling. We're going to have care workers that are struggling through whatever reason, because of the cost of living crisis and everything else. So I'm coming round to my second question to you, Boyd. Will you, with me, or meet with me, so that we can actually construct a letter so that we can write to the government asking them to acknowledge the arguments that were outlined in this CCN report? Because if we don't do something, this problem will continue, and we're just going to be sweeping it under the carpet. And you know that because you're a caring and compassionate sort of person who's been dealt a rough hand. And you need to grasp the nettle. It's all right going out saying we're going to build new railways and roads to Towton and we're going to have a free port. We've got people in care homes who are struggling, people that can't get continence wear because the care home's rationing what they're giving them. Come on. Let's all get real with this. And until we get somebody there that's really takes social care seriously and put that as a priority, we're going to continue struggling. Now, all I'm saying, Boyd, through you, Chair, is let's get together, let's write a letter and explain to the government. They know that there's a problem, they just need a bit of a spur. So, thank you anyway, Chair.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you for your. I think there was a question in there somewhere, but the CCN have already sent it. I will meet with you, but as for a letter, the CCN have already they've published it, and the CCN published such an informed report and urged the Department for Social Care and the Treasury to take note of the additional funding critical to successfully deliver on this government's ambitions, to make adult social care a fairer system for all who need it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. We're close to the hour, but I will take one final question before the other members who've asked questions receive written answers. Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. To the Chair of the Transport and Environment Committee, I understand Centre Bus will cease running the number 19 Melton to Nottingham route from the 10th of April. This will disadvantage those unable to drive and goes against attempts to reduce car use and protect the environment and limit economic development in Melton and West Bridgford. How will the county work with partners to recover this service and protect other services in the near future? Thanks.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I was aware very quickly, actually, that this service had been given notice. In fact, I only live a mile or so away from the route. So I was well aware that of the withdrawal of the service by the current operator. But local bus services are important to our communities, and this is why the County Council continues to invest over £4 million per year to support local services, remembering that some counties no longer fund any local services. The County Council's Transport and Travel Services team are therefore working with alternative operators and Leicestershire County Council to ensure that Nottinghamshire residents continue to have access to public transport, noting that the service crosses the boundary, obviously, from Nottinghamshire into Leicestershire. If we're able to work with Leicestershire, we can look at more options and hopefully more acceptable options. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Gowland, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Given that you are the Chair of the Transport and Environment Committee, it's unfortunate you only found out about it recently, and it highlights the issue, really. Could you, or the Cabinet member who is responsible for transport in the future, write to the government to ask for an integrated transport authority rapidly in advance of any devolution plan to make sure that the person in your position is always appraised of the situation across the area and to be able to try and tackle these problems in the future? Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Well, not quite, and maybe I didn't explain my response, or maybe I was misheard, because I did say that I was aware of it very quickly. Well, I said I was aware of it very quickly, Mr. Chairman, because I live locally, and so I was made aware of it very quickly. And we have actually responded remarkably quickly, and the transport team are at work on it, working on it, to have discussions with Leicestershire County Council and potentially other operators, if they can be persuaded, to take on a service. We can't say it's going to be identical, but to make sure that a service is still available. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. That concludes question time. As I said earlier, those questions that have not been aired at the meeting will be given a formal written answer, and we will move on then to agenda item 10, which is notice of motions. Can I say that motions 1 and 2, which were carried over from January, I believe, have been withdrawn, and we now have only one motion, and I call on Councillor Zadrozny to move his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move motion 3 as printed, which is that this council notes that residents across Nottinghamshire are going through an unprecedented cost of living crisis. Disposable incomes across Nottinghamshire at their lowest level for generations. This council further notes that that rises in energy bills, water bills, broadband and mobile phone bills, food bills, council tax and national insurance. We therefore ask the leaders of the Conservatives, Independent Alliance and Labour groups on Nottinghamshire County Council to write an urgent letter to the Chancellor of the Exchequer calling for the national insurance rise to be scrapped to avoid making the cost of living crisis even worse than it already is. I'll formally move that, Chairman. Do you wish me to have it seconded before I go on to speak? Or? Okay. All right. Mr. Chair, I was disappointed that Councillor Bradley, in his previous oration, almost said he'd fixed this problem while having a subsidised 2-hour free dinner. It wasn't the sort of...
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order, Councillor Bradley.
Which point of order is it?
It's the one where I correct a lie that has just been raised. There is no such thing as a subsidised free dinner in Parliament. Members of Parliament cannot claim for food and drink. That is a common misrepresentation of the system, and Councillor Zadrozny should probably withdraw that because it is untrue.
I won't withdraw that, Mr. Chairman. Everybody knows that MPs have extraordinarily subsidised meals at Parliament. Many members of the public have been guests of members of Parliament, and one only has to look through Councillor Bradley's...
Councillor Zadrozny, you accepted the point of order. You said you're going to withdraw it, and then you're actually repeating...
No, I said I absolutely won't withdraw it, Mr. Chairman. I won't be called a liar in this chamber by a Conservative spin doctor. But, Mr. Chairman, it's laughable after listening to the lies we've had this afternoon from a member of Parliament who's on over £100,000 a year, doesn't turn up to the jobs he's paid to do here, turn up to the jobs he's paid to do here.
Councillor Zadrozny, besides making personal attacks against the leader of this council, can you get on to the subject of your motion?
Mr. Chairman, you allowed the leader of the council to call me a liar in this chamber while he was lying to do so.
He was making a point of order to correct what he considered to be a misstatement by you.
Which point of order did he use, Mr. Chairman?
It could be a personal statement.
Which point of order did he use? Because you failed to ask him.
Can you continue with the business at hand, which is that
Mr.
motion?
Chairman, you keep interrupting me because your side don't like what we're saying. As I said when I started, I thought it was unduly trite for the leader of this council to claim he'd solved poverty for members of the public across Nottinghamshire while having a subsidised meal in number 10 last night. And members have only got to look at his declarations of interest to see how many subsidised meals he has on top of his, and free meals on top of his a huge public purse pay packet, to know that it's a wrong message to be given out from this chamber, that the members of the public aren't suffering at this time, and that's why he was so glad to put up council tax on them so hugely in February, while also cutting services. Which bit's outrageous? Which bit? Which bit? We've had such a nice day. Lie after lie after lie after lie. And you stand up smiling while you do it doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't make it true. And I think it's absolutely outrageous when we're talking about such a serious subject that you joke about it while having a swanky meal. I mean, these are people who you represent in one of the poorest. You said it was in number 10. Okay, Ben. Okay, Ben, you're on the poverty line. I feel for you. You're on the poverty line. If you want to turn this motion about your problems rather than the problems of the people you represent, no wonder the Conservatives are lolling in the polls, even worse in Nottinghamshire than they are in the rest of the country. And Mr. Chair, I think it's a diabolical shame that the leader of the council takes such a serious subject with such levity when he represents such a deprived set of communities, people who are on the bread line, while he's swilling champagne on the taxpayer. Mr. Chairman... Mr. Chairman, every single penny that the leader of the council spends is taxpayers' money. Every single penny, unless he's...
Councillor Zadrozny, you might want to get to the point. You've used over half your time already, and you haven't even spoken to the motion yet properly. So, please move on.
Mr. Chairman, I'll have another 20 minutes if you stopped interrupting me on farcical allegations because your members ask you to. I've never known such a partisan chairman in my born days. It's absolutely... do you know what, Mr. Chairman? I'll leave the speech. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the important 3-line whips that you missed. The 3-line whips, they didn't happen. Another lie. Let's talk about them. What 3-line whip was
Mr. Chairman,
today,
point of order 66. What has this got to do with the motion? You stand here today, Jason, and you want to talk about important topics of the residents of Nottingham, your motion says, suffering at home with the cost of living.
Chairman.
Let's, Mr. Chairman, get talking about how this party and how we support the cost of living, rather than going on a party political broadcast targeting to the leader of this council. Get back to the motion.
Sit down. Councillor Zadrozny, I've told you 3 times now, you've got 4 minutes left. You talk to the motion, please. Otherwise the motion will fall because you haven't spoken about it.
That's not how it works, Mr. Chairman. I know you need a lecture on how the Constitution works, but I think one of the most important things, I wasn't going to go into this, there's so much here, but Councillor Bradley's so far removed from reality that it's a joke. For somebody who went for 6 freebies to Forest last year, the cost of living, 6 freebies. Like on one occasion, on March the 7th, when Councillor Bradley missed another crucial vote, which was the vote about making it harder for Russian criminals to buy property. Instead, he was having another slap-up meal when Forest was versing Huddersfield. And just in case you were too busy enjoying the meal, the game finished 2-1 to Forest. Look, you want to keep talking about your difference versus the residents. This is an important motion. You started this with laughter and jollity. I think you need to take it back to the residents of Bull Farm and Plesley Hill and Mansfield Woodhouse and Ladybrook and tell them that you think it's funny that they can't pay their bills and that you can keep putting up their tax bills. I want members today to support this motion to show we're on the side of Nottinghamshire's 820, although you should have read it, it's in the report. And I think it's an absolute disgrace that somebody who's had their snout in the trough more than any member of this chamber in living history laughs at residents who can't pay their bills. You should be absolutely ashamed of yourself, and I hope that you take it back what you started with.
Do we have a seconder for the motion as written down on the paper? Can we all please settle down while we have a seconder for the motion, and then we'll move on to the debate.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Speakers, anyone has indicated they wish to speak. Councillor Lawton has already indicated.
Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr.
Chairman,
sorry.
I must admit. Bruce, just a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion, please.
To speak to it. We'll circulate the amendment when everybody has it. We'll ask Councillor Pringle to speak to the amendment. Thank you, everybody. Can we settle down? Councillor Pringle, do you want to speak to your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Trying to bring some order. The amendment to the motion, which again is a practical motion, and as it reads in black and white, it is representational in the right way for our residents. So I hope it'll be recognised that the additions that's been made are there to support it, and that all members can support the idea and the way that it's written. I think we can talk about income tax and the CPI at 25.7% and food nearly 10% extra. What really matters is our residents and how we are going to support them for things that we know are coming. This is actually happening. This is not something that we can debate here and then talk about it another meeting. This is happening. We recognise it's happening, and I think there are maximum things that we can do, and I think the letter. Writing the letter is simply the minimum thing that we could do to represent our residents at this moment in time. And again, we're talking about real life. We're not talking about hysteria or something that's in the future that we can't see. We can leave here, we can go on, we can come out of our doors, and we can go into the areas that we know are directly affected. Most people that are going to be directly affected are those people that are working hard, probably with 2 jobs mostly, but are on low pay. These are the people that this is directed at. And to be honest, I think our simple amendment to some of the words actually allows government to continue receiving funding to provide what it's saying it will provide throughout any of the taxes that it wants to raise. So there is no direct financial negativity in what we're proposing, but there is strength in us as a chamber voting unanimously to write this letter in support of our residents. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Creamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to actually second this amendment, as it's already been said by Mike. I'd like to second this amendment. I won't say much. It's fairly self-explanatory, and Mike has actually explained it very well. The Labour Group are happy to support the original motion, of course. Our reason behind making the amendment is simply that we feel that motion could go a lot further, which is why we're asking the Council to write to the Government to request applying a windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas profits at the time of this crisis. As you know, profits are going up in their cases. Many people are rightly concerned at seeing their energy tariffs going up by £2,000 or even by £3,000 a year, perhaps even more. We know there's a global inflationary pressures. We know there's a war in Ukraine, but we also know that North Sea oil and gas companies are expecting to make huge profits in the middle of all this. And that just isn't right. It just isn't fair at this moment, Mr. Chairman. We need to do something to curtail profiteering at a time of national crisis. Just like the panic buys during the pandemic, price gouging on the basic necessities of life, this goes against any sense of moral or social justice. We can't have pensioners and working people literally freezing to death in their homes while these companies are raking it in. It's just not right. I mean, just look at the weather today. People who thought last week that they save on heating, wrong. Temperature's gone right down at this moment in time. It's an ongoing crisis and it will continue to be so. We know also, as Councillor Pringle highlighted, CPI is going up. But in actual fact, the retail price, the actual RPI, which as most people actually relate to more than anything else, is 8.2% as February. And no one's wages are keeping up with that at all. So that's 8.2%. Nationally, the opposite party, nationally their party line is to do anything further to help these most vulnerable or to rein in unethical profiteering. And I'm thinking of P&O at the moment. Not a great sight to see at the moment. We'll see what's happening with P&O. It's about the only chairman in the country that can afford the new electricity bills, I suppose. So this opportunity is appealing to all members opposite to actually join us together today to do the right thing, to support the amendment and actually write to their government, try and get a windfall tax together, try and get this sorted out, even if it's only temporary. This is a moment of crisis, and we need crisis management at this moment. We don't need to go on as we're continuing to go on, as if everything's okay. It isn't, and this actual motion and this amendment actually recognises that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I hope you all support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Zadrozny, do you need to have 5 minutes to consider your position? In that case, I'll adjourn the meeting until 5 to 3. Thank you, everybody. If we could take our seats and reconvene.
Okay, so it's Jason there. Would you like to accept?
Councillor Drozny, would you like to accept the amendment, or?
Mr. Chairman, we'd be delighted to accept this amendment from our progressive colleagues on the right.
In that case, the amendment becomes the altered motion, and I have one indicated speaker so far, and that's Councillor Lawton. If anybody else wishes to speak, could they indicate and make sure that people see them, because we have had a bit of difficulty today missing people because they haven't been raising their hands far enough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will be not supporting the amended motion today. Chairman, this council does note, and we as a group, and you have to be blind and deaf not to realise the implications and the rising cost of living is having on the residents of Nottinghamshire. And we are concerned, and seriously concerned as a group, as to the impact of these costs that are hitting many of our residents, and have done over the previous months, and will do over the coming months as well. However, we will not be supporting the motion, and this is because we find that the motion is disingenuous at the very least, and particularly damaging in the final paragraph. It suggests it's another motion, really, writing to the Minister. How many times have I sat in this chamber and listened to motions where their final response is to write to the Minister concerned? Generally speaking, you don't get a response, and if you do get a response, it's a platitude, and they take absolutely no notice of what you are asking for in the first instance. You know, this has been going on for 25 years as I've been a councillor, and 40 years as a councillor as Philip Owen is concerned. This is chasing, my view is chasing cheap, insincere headlines. It reminds me of I've got to mention this, is the mythomania that is peddled by Councillor Lee Waters over the Highways Review panel. If you say it long enough and as many times, then you end up believing your own rhetoric. The fact of the matter is that what this motion is asking us to do is to scrap a £36 billion raise in national insurance over a 3-year period. And so what will this money be used for? Will it be money used to getting people off the waiting list that has been quite drastically created by the COVID pandemic and also by the Ukraine crisis. So that money will be used to get those people that are waiting to have an operation on the NHS brought forward to get their relevant operation. And then if we can manage to wrestle the money out of the NHS, it will then be used for improving adult social care. So for years, this administration and many other administrations have been asking government to sort out adult social care. They've been kicking the can down the road for as long as I can remember. There was green paper after green paper after green paper, and at the long last, we've got a government that is prepared to grasp this nettle and deal with the very issues that we have been talking about as far as adult social care is concerned. But the opposition are asking us to ignore this again. They are asking us to continue to kick that can down the road, and we are not prepared to follow that route. And we are not prepared, therefore, to support the motion that was put in front of us today. But what tells you a story is that they've asked us to agree with their motion, but there is no alternative. They have not come up with any alternative. This is a national issue. And to be quite frank, I am getting a bit sick and tired in this chamber of discussing national issues when we have very little control over those national issues. We should be dealing with issues we do have control of within Nottinghamshire to help the Nottinghamshire residents that we represent, and that so that we can actually make a difference. But let's look into what this government is doing if that's the route they want to take, and let's hope it's the last time we have a similar motion. So,
Councillor Lawton, your time is up.
Thank you. Round of applause, please. So we won't be supporting the motion. I apologise. I blame Carl for writing too long a speech. Where is it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. I was kind of shocked by that response. So ministers never reply. Call me naive. I'm a new councillor, but maybe if they didn't have second jobs, they'd find time to write back to the councillors.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's funny. I think it's shocking that they don't reply. We know they never replied to the Health Scrutiny Committee when faced with a very important question. You suggest we don't suggest an alternative to national insurance rise. We do. The windfall tax. There are many taxes that we put on people. We know that national insurance is hitting some of the poorest people in the country worst. We certainly understand the needs of adult social care. Councillor Henshaw has just described the problems of lack of incontinence supplies in our care services. You're being disingenuous not supporting this.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chairman. In response to Councillor Lawton, I would hope that Councillor Ben Bradley has some influence in Parliament that we might get a response to a letter. Anyway, as a related matter to the motion, but on a slightly different angle, following the tinkering with the national insurance, an unforeseen consequence of raising the national insurance threshold is that whilst lower earners may save some money now, it could store up problems for later years because workers who earn less than the new NI threshold of $12,750 as a byproduct could unknowingly miss out on NI credits for state pension, which could cause hardship in later years and could end up costing the state more. The state pension forms the backbone of most people's retirement plans. The changes could mean some end up in retirement with less than expected or nothing at all, which again stores up problems for the future. Setting aside the 1.25% increase in national insurance, which will be ring-fenced to pay for social care, whilst raising the NI threshold, it will actually reduce the amount of NI collected from today's workers designed to pay today's state pension. NI collected from today's workers is not invested. It is paid out within 3 months of being received to today's pensioners. If NI receipts allocated to pay state pension are less, this could cause a strain on the system for both today's and tomorrow's pensioners. Long term, this could mean that the funding mechanism of the state pension may need to be reconsidered, or you may find that the state pension age has to increase or suffers a below inflation increase or none at all. Again, this is creating hardships stored up for longer term. It would be far better for all concerned to scrap the 1.25% increase in NI and at the same time look at state pension funding provision. So at your meetings, Ben, if you're not going to support a letter, hopefully you will discuss some of the comments I've just said there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor John O'Lee.
Sorry, Chairman, I had to put my leg back on then, so I do apologise. I just want to follow on from Councillor Bruce Lawton. We constantly see this showboating from the opposition, wanting to write letters, and then in 20 minutes' time they'll be out there on social media saying the Conservatives didn't do this, the Conservatives didn't do that. I've come to be a councillor because I want to talk about how I best can support my residents, what I can do. We've had an announcement this morning by Councillor Tracy Taylor about the Easter vouchers. They're the things I want to be talking about. They're the things I want to be helping my residents with. And this is yet again just showboating by the opposition. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for allowing me to speak. I'm standing here today to support this motion from two parties on this side to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer calling for him to scrap the rise in national insurance to avoid making the cost of living crisis even worse than it is at the present time. Over the last few months, more and more Hucknall residents have been in touch to complain about the cost of living. And while I was walking the streets recently, I was stopped on a number of occasions. A pensioner from Hucknall will see his energy bills double overnight. At the same time, he's seen his pension cut in real terms. A lady from the Bourne estate in Hucknall has seen her benefits slashed as the government cuts begin to bite. We've all heard it said, heat or eat. This has been a reality for this lady for months, and it's getting worse and worse. A gentleman from George Street has seen his water bill rise. He's not sure whether to even turn his kitchen tap on. There will be extra money required, and he doesn't know where it's going to come from. A lady from the Barber Square area can't even look at her council tax bill. She's wondering how she will be able to pay it. A person from the Limby area drives an old banger. His car is his lifeline, but it's been sat on his drive for months. He can't afford to run it anymore. His bus pass is useless. Why is it useless? Because his nearest bus stop is a long way away from his home. And the bus that is from where it is a long way away, the bus is every hour, and that's if it turns up at all. So, Mr. Chairman, what do all my residents have in common? Well, apart from living in Hucknall, they are all living from hand to mouth, struggling financially. In Tesco's in Hucknall, you can pick up a few cans and drop them in the food bank. Many residents say they don't. How can they afford it? So, gas up, electricity up, water bills up, mobile phone bills up, cost of food up, fuel costs up, free school meal claimants up, and now national insurance going up. This is a hammer blow to working people, Mr. Chairman. When will it all end? Now, in December 2019, Boris Johnson, at present the Prime Minister, came to Nottinghamshire. He also said, and I quote, "I can assure the people of Mansfield and Nottinghamshire that the Conservatives are a party of low tax and will not increase national insurance during the lifetime of this new government." He misled the public. He told another whopper. If every time the Prime Minister told a little porky, it would automatically put £1 in every resident's pocket, the cost of living would be over. This is an unnecessary rise. The Tories stated is to plough money into the NHS. But let's look at the facts. The Tories wrote off billions of pounds in fraudulent COVID grants. That money, if collected, could be put in to bolster the NHS. Why are they not putting a tax on the oil companies, an extra tax on the gas? Why are they making? They are making excessive profits from the hike in fuel prices. How offensive is that? Let's be clear. Cutting the national insurance rise will help with the cost of living crisis. It won't fix it. How can I look residents in the eye when they're already reading a line of their council bill that tells them they're paying over £50 a year extra for social care and then paying another £350 a year for exactly the same thing through the national insurance? Please, today, let's send the people of Nottinghamshire a message that we are on their side. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. In response to Councillor Drosdy's comments in his motion and the plea to cancel the NI increases, I would just like to point out that the massive debt that he and his independent alliance has built up in Ashfield, over £90 million, and how this will affect the Ashfield residents far more in the future than this modest rise in NI. This mountain of debt will be a burden on the residents of Ashfield.
Councillor Camilleri, we have a point of order. What's your point of order?
Councillor Camilleri is misleading the chamber, saying that Ashfield District Council...
What point of order is that?
It's 6, yeah. You're misleading the council by saying that Ashfield Independents have put the council into debt. It's not a debt, it's a mortgage.
It's still a debt. It's still a debt. Okay.
Still a debt. I'd also like to point out that Mansfield owes exactly the same, and so does Gedling. So not Gedling, but so does Bassettlaw.
Thank you. You've made your point of order. Sit down, Councillor Bath.
Well, I'll rephrase that, Mr. Chairman. This mortgage, this unaffordable mortgage, which you can't afford, will be a burden on the residents of Ashfield District Council for many years to come, and it will be left to a future administration, hopefully quicker the better, to clear up this unmitigated mess that the Alliance has put it in. Right, only well, that's it. So I respectfully suggest that you get your own house in order first before you start criticising others. And it seems to me that, well, you've had your say. Just calm down, calm down, calm down, calm down. Calm down. You'll cause yourself.
Can we have some order, please? Can we be?
Yes. It seems to me. It seems to me that the windfall tax is a little preemptive because we don't really know how much they've made yet, and it's already been debated in Parliament, and they've made the decision, right? And I'm afraid that's more senior than this. And may I suggest that these profits are used to find a way out of this self-inflicted energy crisis that we've got in, caused by the Western world's reliance upon unreliable and untried technology and expensive and imported oil and gas. And I don't support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camilleri. No other indications? Oh. Helen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Michael Payne, is it?
I just want to read something that's just been released on the chat page this morning. Members of Nottinghamshire Police Mansfield Operation Reacher are collecting food for the Trussell's Trust Sherwood Forest Food Bank based at the Stable Centre in Mansfield Woodhouse. A team spokesman said, the cost of living crisis is having an impact on all of us. Now, you're right, there isn't a lot that we can do with the cost of living crisis. We can't instruct the gas and energy companies to reduce the amount of bills. There's a lot of things we can't do. But one thing that we can do to show that Nottinghamshire residents that we're on our side is write a letter. That's what we're asking you to do. We're not asking you to save the world. We're asking you to write one letter as a joint letter, cross-party letter, that shows that we can all work together. It doesn't have to always be adversarial. Ben, it doesn't always have to be adversarial. We can work together. And I think it's really sad when we've got teams of people like Operation Rita that are some of the best officers that Nottinghamshire Police has got, and they're having to go around collecting food for food banks. That's not their job. They're having to do that because we haven't got the people to do it. The volunteers are doing it every day, and there's not enough of them because we're getting more and more food banks every year. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody said that it was fantastic, the number of food banks that have opened over the last year. It's not fantastic at all. It's not something we should congratulate. It's not a good thing that more food banks are opening. It's a bad thing. We shouldn't need the amount of food banks that we've got. The number of food banks should be reducing because people shouldn't need to use them. Not the fact we shouldn't be saying that it's such a brilliant thing that we're getting more and more food banks. Our police force should not be going round and collecting food for our food banks. Every one of you that doesn't help out, doesn't put something into a food bank, should be absolutely, you're a disgrace. Every week I do work with food banks. So does, I know Elizabeth does a lot of work with food banks, and so do a lot of other of our members. But we shouldn't be having our police force that are supposed to be protecting people. I mean, we were in a position where I had to call 999 the other week, 15 minutes before we got a response from any police officer. No wonder, they're collecting food parcels. That's not their job. They shouldn't be doing things like that. We shouldn't be in a position where our police force feel the need that they have to go round and collect food to help the most vulnerable members of our community. By not supporting this motion, you are saying that you don't support the most vulnerable members of our community, and you should be absolutely ashamed.
Councillor Hollis.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've heard some quite passionate speeches from all involved, but I do thank members of the Independent Alliance and also the Labour Group for putting something forward constructive. And frankly, I don't agree with Councillor Lawton's assertion that somehow we can't send a message and we can't collectively, as a county council who represent every resident in Nottinghamshire, say this is what we feel. Because for the previous half of the meeting, we've heard how great it is to have a lobbyist in tow in Parliament. So we can't lobby. Apparently that's only okay for Ben to do on his own. And because, you know, I've worked for MPs. I'm sure many people in this place have. We've got lobbyists in this chamber as well. The main job of an MP is to lobby because they represent constituents. Our job as representatives, in my eyes, is to not only take decisions, but also lobby with community leaders. So if we want to send a letter collectively to say this is wrong, that's what we should do. I do, however, agree with Councillor Lee, who quite rightly says we should be focused on the stuff we can control as well. But it doesn't stop us occasionally saying, this is that important, we should be doing something about it. And every one of you will have had the same number of calls I've had and the same number of issues. Like, for example, you know, my family do a lot with the food bank, issues down there, seeing it directly. Residents of Huthwaite's energy bills have gone up from £90 a month to £250 a month. The fuel, I mean, it's one of the lowest car ownership areas in the county, if not the lowest. But those of them that do drive now face double the number of costs for doing so. And that's supermarket runs, that's taking kids to school, etc., getting to work. It is a really tough time. And actually, there's stuff we can do directly, like maybe keeping Sure Start centres open that provide these facilities. Oh, wait, we've decided to shut most of them in the most deprived parts of the county, including Huthwaite. And yes, Councillor Camilleri, there is stuff that Ashfield Council do that we don't have to do, like provide a sparkling new leisure centre in every single town in Ashfield.
Can you afford it?
Councillor Camilleri, you were literally a financial advisor that advised people on how to get mortgages. Would you take the call from one of those, Mr. Chairman, and say you shouldn't buy this
Councillor Camilleri, can we stop this banter across the chamber, please?
The £500,000 to buy the cash. However, you can afford the mortgage over 30 years. And by the way, our leisure centres make money per year on top of the service arrangement compared to the mortgage. So yes, we can afford it, and we've provided leisure centres. We've provided, I believe, 50 new play parks across the whole district, two of which are in Huthwaite. And these things are important in the cost of living, because I can tell you something that I certainly can't afford to go on a number of meals out and holidays and things that I once could. And if that's true for me personally, I can almost assure you that's the case for some of the residents who are on average, less than £18,000 a year in Uthwaite, you know. And whether my family's got horses or not is irrelevant. I pay for my season ticket at Nottingham Forest. I don't take £2,000 worth of free hospitality, champagne, food-filled extravaganzas, because that is the package that you were given. I've been on one and I paid for it myself. I didn't get Nottingham Forest to give it me. And I certainly wouldn't be accepting gifts of that generosity. God knows why Nottingham Forest want to give you, Mr. Bradley, free tickets when you represent Mansfield. It doesn't send out the right message. And rightly or wrong, I like that you like Nottingham Forest. It's probably one of the few things even in this chamber we can agree on. But pay for your own ticket. I mean, everybody in this room pays for your salary as an MP during our taxes. And great. But don't be accepting free tickets. It sends out the wrong message. And I think a motion like this does nothing to tarnish what Conservatives are doing. Many Conservative MPs agree with this too. And it seems a non-brainer to simply put a pen to paper and say, cost of living is a problem in Nottinghamshire. Nottinghamshire County Council wants you to rethink and do something about it. It's not more complicated than that, is it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Payne.
Very much, Mr. Chairman. In recent days, we've had unseasonably warm weather in this county, and it's been really nice to see people getting out and about and enjoying themselves. But last night, returning home, it was evident that the temperature had dropped. And driving here this morning, there was snow coming down in a heavy fashion. There are people in our great county and in all of our divisions who have had to sleep outside in that weather. There are people who I have encountered in my own division and who have written to me who are putting on additional sweatshirts or who are not able to heat their homes. And frankly, in the last 15 minutes, to hear this debate descending to who's had extra tickets to a Forest match, or whether Rishi Sunak is a nice man, or whether I might have a different view about things in terms of this council chamber, does an absolute disservice to those people who we come here to represent. Because those people haven't got a voice. Those people need the people who come here to this chamber to speak up for them. I don't want to get into a debate about whether I think Rishi Sunak's a nice man or whether I think what he's done is indecent or not. But I do want to talk about what the government is doing. Because it is clear to me, speaking to people in my division, we desperately need a government that puts the ladder out rather than pulling the ladder up. And I just want to address some of what has been said, Bruce, because you're entitled to your opinions, you're not entitled to your own facts. We're having a debate here about the national insurance rise, and you said, and I quote, and people can go back over the record, that the COVID crisis in Ukraine had created the waiting list in the NHS and the backlog that the national insurance rise would be dealing with. Totally untrue. 2.9 million waiting list in January 2015, which escalated to 4.4 million in December 2019. Before COVID had even hit, NHS waiting times were a record high. So if we're going to have a debate, let's have a debate on the facts and not disingenuous party politics. And I just have to say to you, Councillor Lee, how dare you sit there and say that coming here and talking about poverty is showboating from the opposition?
Chairman, point of order.
No, Councillor, you had your say. It isn't showboating.
Chairman, point of order 96.
Councillor Lee.
Chairman, talking about issues we have no control over is showboating. And I'm more than happy to talk about, to Councillor Payne about being homeless, because I have been homeless. The showboating again, Councillor Payne, sit down, we've had enough of it.
Look, Councillor Lee, you can resort to personal insults all you like. None of it will change the facts of the situation. Your Chancellor's spring statement 2 weeks ago pushed 1.3 million people in this country, including 500,000 children, into poverty. The first time that's ever happened in this country outside of a recession. And you attacking me personally won't change any of that. And they are things when we come to this chamber that we should be concerned about, because just as I have people in my division who will fall in that 500,000 children being pushed into poverty in my division of Arnold North, you too will in your division. So drop the personal remarks and engage in playing the issue and the ball instead of the man. And Councillor Camilleri talked about debt at Ashfield. Councillor Bradley said he was having dinner with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury 2 nights ago. The Chief Secretary of the Treasury gave a speech earlier this week where he said that government debt had escalated 80% this year and was completely out of control. And I won't stand here and say that's as a result of the Conservative government and their policies. That's because we've just been through a global pandemic and we're now facing an horrific international war. So to start castigating issues across the chamber in terms of debt, I think, Councillor Camilleri, is unfair. And you also said that the energy crisis was a self-inflicted crisis. You didn't say anything about the fact that in 2017, the then Secretary of State, Michael Fallon, closed the Rough storage facility, which at the time stored energy in this country to avoid crisis. And as a result of the decision by your government, where did it leave us? With storage in this country that would only get us through 4 or 5 winter days like the one we've had today. Or let me put it another way, 1% of the storage that the rest of the countries around Europe had. 9 times less than the storage of gas that Netherlands have, and 16 times less than other countries around Europe. Decisions taken by a central government matter and they count.
40
it is
seconds
not
left,
right
Councillor.
to say that this is an international crisis. And the Spring Statement did something else as well. 7 out of 8 workers, 27 million out of the 31 million people who work in this country will pay more in tax and national insurance as a result of the decisions taken 2 weeks ago by the Chancellor. So let's drop the personal insults, let's drop the trading of personal insults about people in this chamber, and let's focus on the people outside there in this county that need a voice, whatever our party politics in here, and let's lobby the government to start putting the ladder out instead of pulling the ladder up.
Councillor Payne. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Chairman. I always cheer up immensely when an attack is particularly wounding, because when they attack you personally, it's because they have not a single political argument left. I've heard that said somewhere before, and it's particularly meaningful. Today, with that in mind, I will move on from some of the comments that have been made already and speak to the motion, which hopefully will be refreshing. We can't support the motion for the reasons that Councillor Lawton's laid out. Not going to repeat them all, but clearly this is a hugely important challenge. It is arguably the biggest challenge facing our residents. We recognise that challenge. We recognise the cost of living. There are all sorts of things that we as a council can do, and the important bit there is we can do rather than talk about, to help. We are administering the Household Support Fund. We are funding free school meals, including over the holidays. We are funding countless third sector and community groups to support people on the ground. Some of the food banks, in fact, that Councillor Smith referred to, are funded from this council, as well as other places. There are various things that the government is doing, reducing fuel duty, reducing the UC taper rate, raising the national insurance threshold, a £9 billion energy bill rebate, winter fuel allowance, doubling the household support fund, warm home bonus, VAT relief on energy efficiency. The list goes on forever. The government will provide £243 billion of support in welfare this year, as well as increasing the national living wage, as well as doubling the amount of free childcare available. To suggest that anybody does not care or does not wish to act is just incorrect when faced with the sheer volume of projects, not just in recent months, but over years, that have been introduced by both government and by this council, and we should be proud of those things. There is no silver bullet. There is no perfect answer here. The idea that if the Chancellor turned around tomorrow and scrapped the national insurance rise, everybody would feel so much better off instantly as a result is not the case. There is no perfect answer. We would just have to find funding from somewhere else for social care, for health backlogs and other things. One way or another, things have to be paid for. I'm not comfortable with tax rises. I've made that very clear to the Chancellor already, but we all have to accept that there is no easy or perfect answer in a very difficult time of crisis. It's important to recognise that we're not here to write letters to prove how virtuous we are. That's not an argument. We have levers here within the council. The government has levers that it can use. I am confident that it is using them. It doesn't get everything right. I'm certainly confident that we are using them here within this council because they are the things that we can control. And it's important that we focus on the things we can do. I am not interested in writing letters so we can do press releases to show how much I care about things. We have the ability to help, and that's what we as an administration are trying to do. I'm not stopping you writing letters, Tom. If you want to write letters, go ahead. But the point I'm making quite simply is that as an administration, we don't have to write letters. We can go directly to government and ask these questions, and I have asked these questions, and I will continue to ask these questions. So from my point of view, it's as simple as that. We will continue to work as hard as we can to support the people of this county. I don't recognise, by the way, some of the characterisation and the way that people would like to paint some of our communities. Yes, there are people who are massively struggling. And yes, there are people who need our help. We're doing what we can to help. The government is doing what it can to help. I continue to push government to do what it can to help, recognising there is no perfect answer. But to suggest that every single one of our residents lives in the most abject, hideous poverty, I think is also wrong. We live in a beautiful county where the majority of our residents have good lives and have good support with good local services, and we should recognise that also this is a great place to live, and the majority of our residents recognise that too, notwithstanding the very serious challenges that they face. So we'll do everything we can here to support them. I will continue to push government to support them, but we're already doing that, and we don't need to write letters to prove to residents that we care about them.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Girling.
Thank you, Chairman. As a veteran, I'm quite a pragmatic person, and I sort of work through things in a logical way to try and achieve things. And I'm just going to explain why I'm not going to support the motion, really. And it's because I'd rather say, Ben, can you go down to London and continue supporting on our behalf and making the point that we need support so we can help the residents of Nottinghamshire? Can you go and knock on doors for us? Can you go and speak to people for us? Can you do that on our behalf like you are doing, but keep doing it? That, to me, is far more powerful than a letter that says, as a go, really. But anyway, on food banks, okay? Actually, I absolutely agree we shouldn't have food banks. We shouldn't need food banks, but we do, because things happen to people. People's life become in crisis. And therefore, there has to be some sort of safety net, some mechanism that actually helps those people. And actually, charity, to me, is a great thing. The fact we've got charities out there. We've got veterans charities out there. We've got charities for cancer. We've got charities for every single thing that people in this country care about. That is an absolute indication of how caring the people of this country are. It's a good thing that we have charities because it shows that the society cares. It's not just for government to do it all, society cares. And so that, you know, I don't have to go and stand at a food bank and start giving out food to care about food banks. I have other ways of doing that. And Councillor Pringle will know, during the COVID crisis, the charity I support and work with as a trustee donated thousands and thousands of pounds to food banks so that they could provide the food for those people. So, you can stand in a food bank and hand out a tin of beans, but actually, there's other ways of supporting those food banks by providing finances for them and providing food for them so that they can function. And that's a good thing. And the charity that I'm a part of also support other charities because it's a giving charity. We don't need money. We've got tons of it. So we give it out. And there's loads of examples around this county where we're doing that. So to call the fact we've got a food bank and to say that it's disgusting that we've got a food bank is not quite right. Because actually it shows society cares. It shows society sees and recognises that people go through crises. And they don't always spend their whole life in a crisis. You know, we get in the national telly about, or press about homeless veterans. Well, homeless veterans become homeless because normally, generally, and it is general speaking, they have a fallout with a girlfriend and end up getting kicked out of the house or end up on the street. But they're not out on the street forever. They find accommodation, and it's the charities that do that. So I would rather Ben go down and knock on doors, stand in Parliament and do his speeches, because that's actually doing something. That's being pragmatic, that's getting something done, and that's pushing our point across. And that's one of the big benefits of having Ben sat there as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Girling. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of bits from me. The letter that, you can obviously write your own letter. So nobody's stopping you from writing a letter. So please, if you wish to write a letter, please do. You've got my blessing. But we won't be supporting writing a letter with you because, I'm sure you're completely capable of writing a letter. I think something that's really missed in all of this, and we talked earlier, I think Councillor Payne mentioned it actually, around dealing with what we can affect in this group. And we were talking about things and how we can actually affect change in the roles that we have. Many of you are borough councillors, many of you sit on planning authorities, and you will have heard of something called a supplementary planning policy. It's a material consideration when planning applications are heard. I was in planning committee last night with Councillor Barnfather, and a planning application came through for one of the estates that's going to border the New Gedlin access road, and within that was a special little village section that had been created off to the side, which had air source heat pumps and solar panels. And you at first look at it, you think that's great, brilliant, what a good idea. And obviously, as you know, I quite like solar panels and air source heat pumps. I don't spend too often with them, but I do like them. But the problem with it is these were not on affordable homes. So the people that need the help the most have not got the renewable energy that saves them money on the roofs of their houses or in the gardens. These are on a special development. Now, as planning authorities, you can set SPDs. Okay, you can put solar panels on the roofs of affordable homes. You can put batteries into the lofts of affordable homes that enable not just the energy to be collected when the sun is out, but as the sun goes down, the battery can then power your house. Interestingly as well, solar panels with battery powers can also power the heat pumps within these properties also. So my challenge to those that sit here and dictate as to how areas that they have no control over should operate, should actually ask themselves about, have they got an SPD about affordable homes and renewable energy? Have we got one in play? And we haven't. We have got one about improving and bringing SPDs forward for the actual solar itself and for heat pumps, but not specifically for affordable homes. So if you really want to do something that you can really have an effect on councillors and borough councils, get yourself some brand spanking new SPDs to your planning department that say quite clearly that if there's an affordable home built, a material planning consideration, an SPD, is that those affordable homes will have solar panels, ground air source heat pumps, and operate with batteries as well. And then actually you'll get some money back into the pockets to the people that need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Guilfoyle.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I realise you're not going to support the amendment, which means obviously it will fail. But one of the things that I always like to think about is positive things we can do, which Councillor Bradley mentioned earlier. And one of the positive things that you could reconsider is the 22% reduction to citizens' advice bureaus and some of the other voluntary sector, which happened recently. And I know it's difficult when you're trying to manage the budget. I'm not criticising Councillor Cotty and his committee. I sit on the committee. I understand some of the difficulties. But what I would urge you to do is at a time when people will need more assistance and more help than ever to cut the core grant to organisations like CAB is the wrong thing to do. And I would hope what you could do, Ben, is to go back to the board, look at what that cost is overall, and in real terms, to take it out of reserves if you would, and put that back in. Because I know on the other hand, there's a sort of what I call the funny money. So there's been some other grants given 1 year, etc. But the funny money, they actually need the core grant for the services for the people to manage that other money. And by undercutting their grant, that means that they're going to have to look at, redundancies, etc., etc. It makes it very difficult for them to manage some of the other grants that you've given them as one-offs. So I would urge you, please, to go back, look at it, and give them at least a guarantee of the core grant plus inflation for the next couple of years to see them through, because they will be the people that will bear a lot of brunt of some of the problems that we're going to be facing through the next few months. So I'd urge you to do that if possible.
Thank you, Councillor Guilfoyle. Councillor Sam Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. The cost of living is something that's hurting all of our pockets, and we've heard a lot about the national insurance increase that will, as the Deputy Leader said, help reduce NHS wait times. But we haven't heard yet about the rise of the national insurance personal threshold. That's going up from £9,500 to £12,570 and was announced by the Chancellor. Why is that important? Well, it's important, Mr. Chairman, because that's a tax cut for 30 million people, worth £330 a year to the residents of Nottinghamshire. Delivered, Mr. Chairman, without a letter being sent. And what support is available to those families who are not at work, or the most vulnerable families across Nottinghamshire? Well, again, we've already heard, Mr. Chairman, that the Chancellor is doubling the existing household support fund to £1 billion being distributed by local councils. And that's expected to benefit 3 to 4 million households. Again, Mr. Chairman, without a letter being sent from this council. And we've already heard from the Chairman of the Children and Young People's Committee today that one way Nottinghamshire County Council is distributing that is via the use of free school meal vouchers. And, Mr. Chairman, the slashing of the fuel duty by 5p will save car drivers in Nottinghamshire on average £100. All of that, Mr. Chairman, is action, not just words on a letter. And I am assured that this council will continue to support our residents, and our leader will continue raising their priorities with government. Again, Mr. Chairman, all without a letter having to be sent. There's no need for this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor John Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to remind Councillor Smith that, yes, the national insurance thing's got up, but you've forgotten to mention that the personal tax allowance was frozen until 2026. I don't know the sums for that, but it's pretty high. And I have confidence that Ben will. He's in that position. He will raise our concerns. I'm just disappointed that, everything in this amendment is quite clear. We're just asking, we're forming, lots of people get paid lots of money in government for lobby groups and things like that. We're asking this as a joint effort to recognise this because people are out there. Now, you may all represent, or a lot of you represent, the leafy suburbs or whatever. Well, some of us don't. Some of us have some real cases, some difficult cases that are getting worse. Also to remember is the fact that the write-off, I believe the write-off, I think it was 12 billion, wasn't it, on the poor procurement of PPE and things like that. You forget all those things. There's a lot of mistakes being made. All governments make them, councils make them. But please, this is a plea now because we need to look at this seriously. It's coming along. It's like an express train coming down the track and you're in the middle. The vulnerable people are in the middle of that track. There's no doubt in that. And they'll get hurt and they'll get pushed to one side. I would hope you would agree with the amendment. I know you're not going to go with it, but I do think that I'm looking at Ben straight in the eyes now, that when he talks to the ministers, because I won't get that chance. When you talk to the ministers, Michael might get a chance in another year or so. When he talked to the ministers, that you actually raise these concerns of ordinary people. The tax-paying people, a lot of people, you're hitting another area, and I think at some point you will see that react through the polls. It's very sticky at the moment. There's lots of things going off. There's possibly in 2 months' time another COVID thing coming along, which is probably going to knock us to the side. I'm not blaming government for that, but there's a lot coming there. We've got this maniac in Russia at the moment, going, doing all sorts of things. But all these are coming to bear, and they're coming to bear on ordinary people, ordinary businesses. Even this morning, was it your fish and chips going up or something? There was a small box I saw on the news today with this guy who, I think it was Blackpool, a bit bigger than that iPad, small box there, which was about, £100 not long ago for a fish, for cod. And it's now £200. The fat, the energy to fry it, all the things like that are going up. These are real cases that the people on this side of this chamber are raising. And I don't see any reason why we can't be reasonable. Send a letter there. We're not criticising government on it. We just reminding you, this is really going to hurt people. And on top of that, you saw all that yesterday with the maternity and all those things like that. What was the question never asked by people on the TV or anywhere else? Who caught? Who didn't supply those people? Because you don't Dr. Doherty there will tell us, I don't know how long it is for a maternity person, midwife, to actually train, but it's a long while to get these. You don't just pick them off the shelf.
And we've made mistakes. Probably all governments have made mistakes in the past. We need to be prepared. And what we're saying there, there's damage coming ahead. And can we write and just nudge somebody and keep reminding them? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Doddy.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, for the introduction. When I look at this, I think that it could have been a really good motion. And when I look at it and I see that we have an unprecedented cost of living crisis, we don't have an unprecedented cost of living crisis. We have an unprecedented living crisis. For the first time in 100 years, the life expectancy of people in England is falling. It hasn't fallen in living memory, largely due to COVID, but also due to other factors, largely environmental, obesity, etc. Not only do we have that, but we have the greatest crisis in alcoholism, more liver deaths than we've ever known in history, drug addiction, cocaine deaths up 15% over COVID, mental health problems going through the roof, children with whole lives being lost through a not necessarily a cost of living crisis, just a sheer opportunity to live. Now, I'm going to say that that has not been lost on the government. One of the great things that's been vested upon us recently is the integrated care service. And one of the things that the government insisted through the delivery of that was that we had to address the health inequalities that exist in our society, from the poorest to the richest. And that falls completely within the realms of what we're trying to get across today. Today is not about the fact that the cost of living has gone up for individuals, but that this huge divide exists between the health of those people who live in the best areas and those people who live in the poorest areas. What we need to do is to continue to address what we have known for a long, long time, that there is a close association between the person, their social environment, and their health. You cannot escape that fact that we live in a society, we live in a world that directly affects our health. First put forward in the 1990s by Dahlgren and Whitehead. Then Professor Sir Michael Marmot said, give people a chance to have a fair life, and then you'll get a healthy society. So what he was basically saying, if you give every child the best chance, you send them to a good school, you get them a decent education, then they can get a good job, then they can get good housing, then they can have a family, and then they will live a healthy, longer life. So our challenge is not necessarily the cost of food, our challenge is not necessarily the increase in that, but recognizing that we must address the overall inequalities that exist through smoking, through housing, through jobs, through the economy, etc. And I'm delighted to say that that's what we are charged with on the Health and Wellbeing Board. The government had made it absolute clear priority that health inequalities must be addressed. So the concept that nothing has been done is not necessarily true. I don't mind how the money is raised as long as that money comes in and we're able to distribute it to improve the health and well-being of the people of Nottinghamshire. I think the motion could have been tweaked to be something very different, but I can't support it in its current mode. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doddy. Councillor Purdue-Horan, you reserve your right to speak. Do you wish to exercise it?
Mr. Chairman, I find it fascinating, the facts that have come out, that people have picked out, and I think it's made this debate very worthwhile. I don't think this side of the chamber has been in any way insincere or disingenuous or showboating. the decisions taken, perhaps over many years, but certainly brought to the latest head at the spring statement by the Chancellor, has an enormous effect on our residents in Nottinghamshire. And as the senior debating chamber, I think we have a right to pass comment on that. I suspect many of us purchase the weekend newspapers on Saturdays and Sundays, and respected independent economists have said all sorts of things, and in the main have come down against the Chancellor's announcements. When was it? Last week or so? You know, we're facing the worst standard of living crisis since Clement Attlee was Prime Minister, immediately following the Second World War. And all we are asking, because there's been 15 tax rises, we have now the highest rate of taxation on GDP than there has been. And what is disingenuous and insincere is the Prime Minister and his front bench colleagues asserting that they are the party of low taxation, and the Chancellor announcing a penny off income tax. Oh, but that's in the future, maybe. Mr. Chairman, I won't even attempt to match some of the comments from our colleagues in the Labour group, and indeed my own colleagues behind me. But in my notes that I did my research on, some fascinating and frightening figures. Tens of thousands of families across Nottinghamshire face a loss of income of £1,200 a year as a result of tax rises and soaring energy bills, food prices and fuel costs. We are in the middle, or certainly, as Councillor John Clark said, facing an express train coming down the track that our residents will feel, and particularly the vulnerable, but also not just the vulnerable. Those people who I think Theresa May described as the jams, the just about managing. We have child poverty in Nottinghamshire is rising. The figure I've got here is 23,068 pupils, 20.4% of children now claiming free school meals. We're living in a world where one in five of our children go hungry. And Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that Councillor Bethan Eddy in Warsaw wants to be perceived as someone who doesn't care. I don't believe Councillor Callum Bailey in Worksop North wants to be perceived as someone who doesn't care. One of our most sensitive councillors, Councillor Matt Barney, will not want to be perceived as uncaring in his division. And indeed in my own ward and in Councillor Neil Clark's division, Bingham West ward contained the area of greatest poverty in Rushcliffe a few years ago. I don't know what it is now. So, Mr. Chairman, I just ask our colleagues to support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Rodney, you have the right to sum up. No. It was let the Chief Executive just clarify.
So, Councillor Zadrozny accepted the amendment, so it becomes the altered motion. de facto the substantive motion, so the rules of debate apply to the substantive motion, which means that Councillor Zadrozny has the right to sum up.
Yeah. Councillor Zadrozny.
Thank you, Chair. I'm disappointed in the tone of the opposition to the motion from a number of members, and it was clear that Councillor Lawton started it by reading a pre-prepared speech that was about the original motion and not the one that was amended, because he talked about no alternative, which of course is very firmly in the altered motion, because there is a substantial change in terms of there being a fiscal alternative with regards to the tax rise there. And I think they've sort of held their feet to the fire there, but without reading the difference. And I'm really at a loss to understand. There seems to be the biggest objection to this is that it's a letter. Most people were upset that it's a letter, and I'd be quite happy to have accepted an amendment that says, we ask the leader of the council to go down and assert these things and bring back his findings back to the county council. If you're so precious about a letter, and we'll pay for the stamp, I'm not sure what the issue is, because we've had a flip flop here where we had a whole previous debate about how it was so valuable, again, to have the leader of the council who can sit in Parliament. But then we had the deputy leader of the council say that MPs don't listen to us, ministers don't write back to us anyway. It's a dichotomy that was really bizarre. And we need to pick one of those things or the other. There were a number of members on the opposition benches wincing while Councillor Lawton spoke, particularly when Councillor Camilleri was speaking, because they didn't agree with what was being said. And it was clear to me that Conservatives feel uncomfortable, because you only have to look at page 1 of the Conservative manifesto. It's page 1, 2019. We will not raise the rate of income tax, VAT or national insurance. And members have spoken here about what we can do. Councillor Bradley was at length to say, we are in this chamber to talk about what we can do. And the last chance he had to do something, he put council tax up by 4% on every house. So putting the hands in the pocket of people who he knows cannot afford it. And that's at a time when we can afford, the government can afford to write off billions of pounds of dodgy COVID deals. There's a time when Councillor Bradley's own voting record is about raising taxes on banks, is 100% against it. We've had 12 years of a Conservative government, and people are more hungry. They are more cold. There are more homeless people. There are more people who feel helpless now. And I can't rate with the same level of erudition as Councillor Payne about that. But we represent across our county, from the most affluent wards to the most deprived, people who are struggling. And when people say just about managing, we're at a day when energy companies across the UK, all of their customer service lines have crashed because people in a desperate panic are phoning in their meter readings so that they don't get charged tomorrow's tariff instead of today. People are panicking across our county and across the country because they don't know whether they'll be able to feed themselves. I'd got a phone call this morning from an old lady in my ward who said to me she boils the kettle once a day and fills a flask up with hot water so she can have cups of tea throughout the day because that's all she feels she can afford to do. So to start the debate in the levity that it started right at the beginning, and to say it's showboating, I only want to deal with things Well, I only want to deal with things in Nottinghamshire. At the same time, you're sending your application form for Bolton South East. It's outrageous for members to say that a letter's try. It's showboating. If a letter's the only thing we can do, or if you want to make an amendment and say these are the thoughts of this council, the council wants to stand by the side of people when it can and say that there are other ways of looking at this. If the letter's the only way we're going to get it, or if we're going to ask for a minister to come down, or if we're going to empower the leader of the council with a message where he could go to a minister, McDonald's or otherwise, and say, look, this was a unanimous decision of the council. People are struggling. They're worried about feeding themselves or whether they can heat their homes, this is a genuine crisis, then I think it would have been excellent to have some unanimity. And of course we can write a letter. It wasn't about the letter, it was about showing the government that they need to act in a more comprehensive way, not a penny off fuel or an extra or raising the income tax. People won't be able to feed themselves and you laugh it off as writing a letter. It's an abject shame because there's everybody in this chamber. I can't think of a division which is affluent enough where there will be no poverty. There's not one. And you've got to go back to those residents and say, we didn't want to speak up when we could. It's fine to shrug. But there's a chance here for people to stand together and say, look, or amend it. Councillor Doddy wanted to amend it, didn't amend it. There's ways of changing these things if you feel strongly enough that this wasn't the right path entirely, of standing together and saying this is the biggest crisis. Taxes are at a higher level than even Michael Foot wanted to put up. People will be in abject poverty, and we are showing them today that you don't want to take any measure where you can, or at least look like you're on their side. And that's a really strong and powerful message from an administration and a member of parliament to say, when we could speak up, we chose not to. Poverty is not a natural thing, it's man-made. And men can fix it. And today's I'll issue that under a supplementary planning guidance, Councillor Adams. We can choose to make a stand to fix these things and be on the side of people who are panicking tonight. And I hope members, the many I saw wincing when the Deputy Leader was speaking, choose to support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Drosney. Just to remind everybody that we are voting on the altered motion, which was accepted as a substantive motion. So all those in favour, please indicate. All those against?
We've got to finish the vote firstly. Okay, we're going to have a recorded vote. Yeah. Well, it's 34 in the hat, so we might have made a mistake, but he wants a recorded vote.
We've had a request for a recorded vote. I need 10 members to request it. More than 10, yeah. Right, we'll now move to the recorded vote. Has the division bell been sounded? Yeah.
Right, yeah, it was 27-34 because that was out of chain.
Yeah. So the Chief Executive is now going to take the recorded vote. Sorry, the monitoring officer.
No, she's going now.
Yeah. Right, can we settle down, please, while the Chief Executive takes the recorded vote?
Starting, please, if I may, with Councillor Adair.
Against.
Councillor Adams.
Well, just shout.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Anderson.
Against.
Councillor Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Barney. Councillor Barnfather. Councillor Bradley. Councillor Butler. Councillor Callaghan. Councillor Camilleri. Councillor Carlton. Councillor John Clark.
For.
Councillor Neil Clark.
Against.
Councillor Corden.
Against.
Councillor Cotty.
Against.
Councillor Creamer.
For.
Councillor Cubley. Councillor Darby. Councillor Deakin. Councillor Doddy. Councillor Eddy.
Against.
Councillor Elliott. Councillor Fielding. Councillor Fole. Councillor Guilfoyle.
For.
Councillor Girling.
Against.
Councillor Gowland.
For.
Councillor Henry.
For.
Councillor Henshaw. Councillor Hollis. Councillor Introna. Councillor Roger Jackson.
Against.
Councillor Kerry. Councillor Lawton. Councillor Lee. Councillor Martin. Councillor Meakin. Councillor Moxon. Councillor Ogle.
Against.
Councillor Owen. Councillor Payne. Councillor Place. Councillor Pringle. Councillor Purdue Horan. Councillor Quigley.
Against.
Councillor Saddington. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Helen Ann Smith. Councillor Sam Smith. Sam.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Smith. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Turner. Councillor Upton.
Against.
Councillor Waters. Councillor Welsh.
For.
Councillor Gordon Wheeler. Councillor Jonathan Wheeler. Councillor Daniel Williamson.
For.
Councillor Elizabeth Williamson. Councillor Wilmot. And Councillor Zadrozny. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. The result of the recorded vote is 35 against, 27 for, so the motion is lost. Can I thank everyone for their attendance today? This is my last meeting, proper meeting as chairman, as the next full meeting of council is the AGM, when I'll be handing over to my vice chairman, Roger Jackson, who will be taking over as chairman. So some of you may be glad it's my last meeting. But I can say it's certainly been an interesting year. The meeting is now closed.